Welcome to episode 15 of The Player and the Journalist with Karson Harris and David Vick. In this episode, we will reflect on the year that was in women's lacrosse. Miss Karson, I heard on the radio this week that 1 in 10 people get injured while decorating their Christmas tree. Are you one of these 10 people?
I am not, but my mom and I did just buy our Christmas tree yesterday, and we accidentally bought one that was way more expensive than we thought it was going to be, but it already been wrapped up and put in our car. So we have a very fancy Christmas tree this year. Real life. It's like 9 feet tall, barely fit in the house. So financially maybe injured, yes. Physically injured, not this year so far.
So 9 feet tall. I hope you have enough space for that. That's pretty freaking huge.
We did have to cut off some of the branches at the top, and we had to cut off significant amount at the bottom, but it now fits.
Shades of Christmas Vacation over here.
Yeah. My brother normally goes with us, and he's never going to let us go by ourselves again. He wasn't there this year, and he's never going to let us go.
This is why you buy a fake Christmas tree that you can use year after year and no cutting has to take place.
I can't get behind it. It doesn't smell the same.
Okay, must be a Maryland thing. Anyway, so our first recap of 2022, we will go over the player of the year. Karson, I know you have some thoughts on this, so we're gonna jump right into it now that we have the Christmas tree thing out the way. Okay, who do you think the player of the year should have been?
Okay, so I love Charlotte North. I have a ton of respect for Charlotte North. But my player of this year was definitely Jamie Ortega. I think that I felt like she got gypped. I mean, she had 69 goals, 44 assists. She had 113 points. Charlotte North, 92 goals, 23 assists, 115 points. Like, they're neck and neck. And I understand that Charlotte North has the draw control thing. And I think that's probably what put her over the edge in the eye of the Torton Award givers. I think last year that Charlotte North 100% deserved it. And I just think this year she had to try too hard to still be that player because everyone was watching out for her so much that, in my opinion, there were a lot of unforced errors coming from Charlotte North in 2022 that Jamie Ortega didn't have. And I just think that Ortega she was such a consistent player this year, and she wasn't always the flashiest. She didn't always stand out, but she found a way to make her and her teammates around her look good without trying too hard. And I think that is what makes a good player. So for me, I think she was my player of the year.
Interesting. See,
personally,
I did not think you were going to go with her.
Really?
So I did not choose her either, even though I wanted her to win the Tewaaraton. I know that the Tewaaraton is a yearly award, but I just wanted her to win it so bad for her 5 years. I mean, I feel like
I have that written down. I literally said, I was like, she deserved a nod for her consistency. Yeah. Like, she was a 5-time All-American. Like, she finished second in assists. Like, she was leading goal scorer. I just think that she did win, like, the National Player of the Year award for, like, the Honda Award, I think it was. So I think that was kind of a nod to her consistency. But I agree. I think the Torton this year would have been a good, like, accumulation of her 5 years.
For sure. So I feel like, I mean, for Jamie Ortega to go 5 years and not have one Tewaaraton to show for it is a little disappointing. But at the end of the day, everyone knows how great of a player she is. I just think that maybe like 15, 20 years down the road, when people haven't known her and they go down the Tewaaraton list, you know, she doesn't have one. But I think we know. I mean, so I just wish she would have gotten a Tewaaraton at least once.
I feel like she deserved one for her name, and if somebody was going to get it, she won a national championship. Like, I just think that this was her year.
For sure. So I actually have Meaghan Tyrrell.
Ah, okay.
So we're sticking in the ACC. I just thought she just had that it factor this year, kind of like Charlotte North had in 2021. And she was just fun to watch. She was electric. I think maybe something that worked against her is that this could be, some people might disagree with this, but I feel like Syracuse had more scoring depth offensively than Boston College. I feel like whenever Boston College needed a goal, you knew who they were going to go to, whereas with Syracuse, they had Meaghan Tyrrell, Emma Tyrrell, Tereshchuk. I mean, they had a bunch of different players that could contribute. Sam Swart, you know, and so I feel like that might have worked against her. But at the end of the day, I just feel like she had that it factor. You mentioned some stats earlier. So she had 78 goals, 33 assists, 24 turnovers. So she had 14 less goals than Charlotte North, but she had 43 less shots, which is a big difference.
Yeah.
And she had more assists, fewer turnovers. But one thing I was thinking of when I was thinking about this, I think that something Charlotte North had going for her, aside from being like the go-to for Boston College offensively, is that she also took the draw.
Yeah, for sure.
And Ortega, Tyrrell, they did not take the draw. And so I feel like that might have been the separating factor. So I don't know. It's a tough one. I feel like there were so many good options. But
I also think that Syracuse losing in they pick the tournament after the NCAA, right? After the NCAA tournament. I think that them losing to Northwestern pretty handedly in the tournament.
They got smacked.
Yeah, I think that probably hurt her as well. I think they look at those games like pretty seriously too, and I feel like that could have hurt her run for the award just because that was a tough game.
Yeah, they got absolutely mollywopped. I think they only had a few goals in that game. I can't even.
Yeah, I just looked it up. It was 4-15.
4 goals? Are you kidding me? Oh,
yeah, Meaghan Tyrrell did have 3 of them, so that helps her cause.
Sheesh. Yeah, I remember watching that game. I was shocked. I thought Syracuse was going to win the game, and then they just completely get dragged off the field. Dragged into the water off the side of the field. That was pretty bad. So just to recap on the Player of the Year, Charlotte North won the Tewaaraton. Karson has Jamie Ortega as her Player of the Year. I had Meaghan Tyrrell. So all ACC players, Boston College, Syracuse, and North Carolina, 3 of the best teams in the country. Awesome. Next up, Game of the Year, Karson. I already know my pick is going to catch some people off guard. What is your pick?
Oh, well, then I will not have the same pick as you because I feel like mine is pretty run-of-the-mill this time. I feel like the UNC Northwestern semifinal NCAA tournament game has to be my game of the year. I have a little bit of a soft spot for North Carolina. I always love the way they play. I go there now, so I have it. So my first 2 being North Carolina could have something to do with that. But I remember I got to also watch that whole game, and I just remember being in absolute shock that it was happening. They were down 14-7, just for a recap for people who don't know. They were down 14-7 with 10 minutes left, which puts you having to average about a goal every minute and a half, which is just insane. Geiersbach scored her very first of the game with 5:27 left in the game, and then went on to have 5 goals that game. I just think that they also the goalie play in that, for Taylor Moreno for Jenny Levy to have the trust to put her freshman backup goalkeeper in a semifinal game, and she didn't end up making any saves, but I think that that trust to put her in and give Taylor Moreno the reset for then Moreno to come back in and make that huge save against Lauren Gilbert, point blank shot to basically run the clock out to win the game. I just think overall the defense in that game, the confidence that UNC had to have to come back from an 8-goal. I have been there, and to not give up on yourself in that game just must have took so much dedication and determination from the Carolina team that I think I gotta give it to them, because they trailed by 8 goals twice in that game, I'm pretty sure, which is the largest deficit that they'd seen all season. And I think that that's a tough point to be in, from a mindset, from a mental standpoint, to be sitting in a game down that much where you've never been in that spot before, to go to an NCAA championship. The mental strength you have to get to that game and claw your way back to winning it is just so admirable. So I feel like I gotta give it to them, because I don't know, it was just insane, and I was so happy that I got to watch that whole thing play out.
So there are 2 points. Obviously, that was a great game. There are 2 points you mentioned that I'm very happy you mentioned. One was the Taylor Moreno save at the end of the game. I feel like that kind of gets lost just because of Sam Geiersbach and the offensive showcase that they put on to come back. So that save was absolutely insane on Lauren Gilbert, by the way, who was absolutely tremendous. And then you talked about the mental state of the team to get through that. I think I would have been thinking, if I were them, probably, oh, here we go again, because they had gotten to the Final Four time and time again and gotten beat, obviously, by Boston College. And this time they were losing to Northwestern, who No offense to Northwestern, and actually one of the sisters of a player who plays for Northwestern sent me a message. She was not very happy with me prior to the game because I put a poll on the lacrosse extras, and I was like, what's more likely, a close game or a North Carolina blowout? Because I thought that, and I think, obviously, I'm not speaking for everyone, but I think a lot of people thought North Carolina was going to win the game. And personally,
Yeah.
I just thought I was thinking at the time, North Carolina blowout or a close game, what is more likely? And so I will not name the player. She's actually a starter for them, very good player. Her sister was not very happy. And then she messaged me after the game, and I was like, you're right, I'm sorry. But anyways, so.
But also, it was a close game.
So yeah, so that was a crazy game. And North Carolina, they got it done somehow, some way. It was not looking good for them, but they pulled it out. So do you have any guesses on what you think my game of the year will be?
No, I have no idea. Can you give me a hint?
It's a regular season game.
A regular season game. Oh, Jesus. No, I don't have a guess. There's so many games, and I don't know sometimes.
Yes, there are a ton of games. And before I mention this, I will say, as someone who watches a million women's lacrosse games each year, especially over the past few years, I watched a ton of lacrosse games, okay? Women's lacrosse. I don't care about men's lacrosse. And this game, it was a regular season game, and it just made me feel some type of way that regular season games do not make me feel, okay? It was kind of a tournament atmosphere. It was neck and neck. So I'm taking you back to March 10th, a Thursday night game, okay? And we don't have enough night games in women's lacrosse. Let me just say that. Anyways, Thursday night game, Duke versus Pittsburgh.
Oh,
at Karson Stadium, 15-14. Game was bonkers, okay?
That was a crazy game. 6
different ties, including when it was 14-14. Kat Berry scored the game winner with 1:51 to go. Both teams had 9. Let me repeat that. 9 different goal scorers, okay? And the leading goal scorers for each team, let's see. It wasn't Kat Berry for Duke. It wasn't KD Simone for Duke. For Pitt, it wasn't Paige Petty, okay? Players stepped up in this game. It was crazy. It was a night game, which added to the intensity. We need more night games. I'll get off my night game spiel. Anyways, so Pitt finished the season 9-10. If they would have won that game, they would have been 10-9 and eligible for the NCAA tournament. So that obviously, one game here, one game there makes a big difference. And so they probably feel like they could have won a lot of other games that were close. But this game was crazy, okay? Duke versus Pittsburgh, 15-14, had me on the edge of my seat. I was not flipping the channel on ESPN+. I was sticking on the game, okay? Because this game was crazy.
I remember I watched that whole game too, and I wanted Pitt to win so bad. I was like, this is their game. Like, give them this game, and they will have so much confidence. I think that game could have changed so much of their season. Like, yeah, make them 10-9, but it could have made them 11-8, 12-7. Like, just that, the confidence that you can get from beating a team like Duke. Oh, I wanted them to win that game so bad. I remember it. It was so good.
For sure. So that was a great game. And the game of the year was tough. There were a lot of good ones. Obviously, I feel like most people would choose your game of the year.
Yeah, I think so.
Just because of the stage, what was on the line, how North Carolina came back. So anyways, a lot of great games, which is what we want in women's lacrosse. If we have trouble picking the game of the year, it normally means it was a good season, okay? So hopefully we have that issue every single year going forward.
I hope so. We're getting close. I'm so excited. Only like 2 months.
I know. I cannot wait until we get to January and we kind of go over some schedules that came out recently and kind of our predictions for the year. And Clemson, Mike, I know this is looking ahead, but their non-conference schedule has got to be the worst I've ever seen. Okay, it is terrible. Anyway, we're sticking with 2022 this year. Surprise of the year. What was your surprise of the year, Karson?
I had Aurora Cordingley was my player surprise of the year. I think her popping off this year was so happy for her. But I also had an honorable mention in Lauren Gilbert, and I'll get to both of them because I do think that she also surprised me a lot. But Aurora Cordingley, just to put this in perspective, she scored 67 goals this year, had 51 assists, and her first year at Maryland, like she came in as a transfer and popped off for them, which I think is it's outstanding feat considering she just come from Hopkins where she had scored 39 goals and had 18 assists, playing lower caliber teams than she was playing at Maryland. in her senior year. And I played her for 3 of my 4 years, for I guess 3 of my 5 years Drexel. Like, I played Aurora accordingly, and she always did well against us, but she was never a huge threat. She was never somebody like, she was for Hopkins, but it was never like, this girl's going to run over us. And if we were to play her now, that girl would run over us. Like, I just think that it was incredible to watch somebody fit into a system so well. And how I think it highlights how important it is, like, when you're choosing a school, to look at how they play. What is their style of play? Like, how the way I like to play fit into that? Because I don't think she fit in at Hopkins. I don't think the way that she played worked for her in their systems. And then when she went to Maryland, and I think surprised us all with this incredible ability to play lacrosse, like, it just kind of highlights how special she actually was. And it kind of is a bummer that she didn't get to be there for longer, because I don't know, she surprised me this year. I literally wrote down, like, where did this girl come from? Because I had barely heard her name and had played her for 4 years, and now she, like, was a star. But I also can't leave out Lauren Gilbert in this, and I've talked about her before, how much I love her as a player. And she scored only like 10 more goals this year than she did her senior year. But you have to remember, last year she had Izzy Skane also on the field with her. So she scored 66 goals her senior year, not being the star. She wasn't the one everyone was worried about. She wasn't the one that people were watching to make sure she scored. And then this year she came and scored 79 goals without Izzy Skane on the field. And she was the target. She was the one people were looking at. And she still scored more goals than she did last year. So I think that really stands out as, like, something that surprised me, because I honestly, when Northwestern started this game, I was like, they are going to be horrible this year. Like, that is not going to work out, because I just felt like they had so much revolve around Izzy Skane, and her ability to step up was surprising to me, but also something that I loved. She also increased her assists by like 3 times last year, which I think shows, because she's a speed demon, right? Like, she's always dodging, she's always doing that. But I think her ability to also adapt and make plays for her teammates in games, more so than she had before, is something really cool to do with a 5th year. Like, my 5th year, I could not change. Like, you could do whatever you wanted to me, I was not going to be able to do it. But, like, her ability to adapt, after 4 years of playing college lacrosse, I think was really cool. So I don't know. I had 2 for that, because I think they surprised me in different ways. So I had to give them both a shout out.
Hey, no worries. I have 2 for this one as well. And about Aurora Cordingley, the one you started with, no one saw that one coming. Okay.
No.
I just wonder what was, like, leading up to the season, going through like practices and stuff in the fall, and then, in January. What were the Maryland coaches thinking? Were they thinking, oh, we have something here that's going to catch everyone off guard, or did it even catch them off guard going into the season? I would love to know the answer to that question.
Yeah. Well, like, when we talked to Coach Kimmel, like, she was basically like, yeah, my transfers, they come in, like, we give them a fair shot, but sometimes they end up as really good practice players. She was very, like, honest about that. So I wonder if Maryland was thinking the same thing, like, she'll be a really good player for us to challenge our starters.
Yeah.
And then she just blossomed.
For sure. That was crazy. Yeah, that was crazy. So actually, you went with 2 players. I have 2 teams for you. One is a team as, like, the whole for the season. That's American University. They were very fun to watch last year, 9-9, after going 1-7 in 2021. 1-7. They had a lot of issues with their schedules, or with their scheduling, and so they went 1-7. Last year, 9-9. They almost beat Army. I think that score was 17-14 in the regular season. They were competitive with Navy in the regular season. They then played them in the conference tournament. Wasn't as competitive, but 9-9. That's a big jump for them. Lindsay Teeters, their head coach, is doing a really good job. Fun fact: they have a cousin of Sam Puzo on the team. I'm pretty sure she's the cousin. So I talked with Lindsay Teeters about this one time, and she told me before she came, she's like, yeah, we were recruiting her, blah, blah. And so last year was her freshman year. I don't think she played a whole lot, but still a fun fact, because Sam Puzo is lacrosse royalty. So look up Americans roster. I do not know her name off the top of my head. So they went 9-9, and they were fun to watch. I think, a team like American, especially after going 1-7, there weren't a whole lot of expectations for them. I love seeing schools like that have good seasons. American, Campbell, Gardner-Webb. I love seeing teams that aren't lacrosse blue bloods. They aren't maybe even like the greatest in other sports, and they have good years. I think that's great to see. So I was very happy to see American have a good year, and they have a really good goalie. Check her out in 2023. Second team, this is more of a decision by the NCAA committee. For Arizona State not to make the NCAA tournament was complete ridiculousness, okay? Absolutely made no sense whatsoever. Obviously, I did an opinion piece on this on Lacrosse Extras. UConn made the tournament above them, and Johns Hopkins made the tournament instead of them. Both of those teams combined had fewer ranked wins than Arizona State. It makes no sense. And if just going off the eye test, okay, if you put Arizona State on the same field with UConn, they're going to beat them. If you put them on the same field with Johns Hopkins, they're going to smack the crap out of them. Let's just be honest, okay?
Right.
I mean, this is absolutely crazy. What are your thoughts?
I completely agree with you. I think that I'm looking at their schedule now, and I mean their win over Rutgers, you let them in solely on their win over Rutgers. I mean that was such a crazy game. Like I just think that you can watch them play and you see top caliber level play. Like that is, it's not as crisp, as clean as your UNC, as your Boston College, whatever, but their style of play, I feel like, is that it is. You can, and when you watch Hopkins play, it's not like it's slower. It's methodical. You can see people thinking, but like the way that ASU plays is that like fast level play that I believe could give on any given day, could give any of those top 10 teams a run for their money. I think if they have a good day and one of them doesn't, like I think talk about that Syracuse game. I put ASU in that game instead of Northwestern. ASU comes away with a win. Like I just think that that style of play was going to be more successful in the tournament than both Hopkins and UConn. And I agree with you. I think I don't understand the reasoning for the decision at all. Because they lost to Stanford in their like tournament championship, but they whopped Stanford in regular season. So like we can't even look at that as like a final factor. So I agree with you. I think they totally deserved it.
Yeah, I think they got punished for having a hard schedule. They had a really tough schedule. Like they played Stony Brook at Stony Brook. They played some really good teams. And if they would have done what Clemson's doing next year and just put in some bad teams, they would have won and probably been in the tournament. So I don't think you should be punished for having a tough schedule. And so oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just say they had not. I just counted. They have 9 of their games were against a top 20 team in their regular season, which is just if you're playing a schedule like that.
Yeah, I mean you're gonna have a lot of losses at the end of the day. It doesn't matter who that team is. So I think they were a little inconsistent at times, but at the end of the day, their schedule and their wins were better than UConn and Johns Hopkins, and them at their best was better than both of the other teams at their best. And so that was frustrating. And it's really interesting that the whole Arizona State coaching staff ended up going to Johns Hopkins. So kind of funny how that works out.
Yeah, no, they're probably like, screw you. We'll go to a school that you'll let into the tournament no matter what.
Yeah. So yeah, Arizona State, I'm very excited to see what they do next year. I think this was a great year for them. They got a whole lot of attention, as they should have. And they had a lot of yellow cards. So someone commented on Instagram and was like, they probably didn't get in because of their yellow cards, which was the weirdest thing ever. Okay. But anyway, so those were our surprises of the year, plural. We could not keep it to one. Okay, favorite moment of the year, Karson.
Okay, so
what do you got?
Obviously, Drexel women's lacrosse winning their very first CAA championship in overtime. That's gotta be number one. Allie Drake scoring our game-winning goal. Obviously, such an incredible player to score it. It was just obviously that's my favorite moment of the year. But I gave it another one because that one was too predictable, and clearly it's gonna be about me. So I also, which is kind of, it goes along the same sort of fairy tale ending situation. So it's probably because I'm biased to that. But St. Joe's, when they defeated UMass, I think, in their conference, they won their first ever Atlantic 10 conference championship this year against UMass, who was ranked 13 going into the game. And I'm also impartial to St. Joe's. Like, I love the way they play. They have a similar style to like Drexel, I think, where they're just fast and gritty and determined. So I kind of have it in my heart for them. They lost 8-14 in the regular season to UMass. And I remember that game was played before our game was. And we knew I think we either knew we were in the tournament or like that moment hadn't happened yet. And I remember watching that game and watching them win it and just seeing how happy, like seeing the St. Joe's women's lacrosse players just like pile on each other and I was sitting in my bed just bawling because I was like, our game hadn't happened yet. And I was like, I want that to be me so bad. Like, I can't wait till that's me. And I think just like watching that fairy tale come true was, for those players, I think was a special moment for me. And I think it's definitely experience is altering that moment for me. But I think that was my favorite moment of the year because I love when teams who aren't supposed to win. And I think watching them win that game was just a cool moment for me specifically, especially because I was sitting there crossing my fingers. It was coming for me next. So I think that's mine.
Interesting choice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, St. Joe's, they kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like for the past few years, they've had moments where they've been competitive against good teams, but they just haven't put it all together. And
yeah,
so,
I feel like they have a similar, sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, I feel like they have a similar, like, honestly, kind of a similar story to Drexel, and just the fact, like, they've been so close. Like, they've been almost about to be good, or they've had really cool games, and then when it gets to like the big games, they lose. Like, I just think that they've had a very similar story in the fact that they have been on the brink of greatness for so long that this win was. Then they did go on and lose in the first round of the NCAA tournament, but that's okay. This game was still cool.
Hey, if you lose in the first round, that's not a shame on you, okay?
Right.
I mean,
No.
the tournament is tough. So you mentioned the happiness and the joy that St. Joe's had when they won. And so my moment is similar in that regard. And I know the past 2 episodes I've been talking about Duke. And I'm sticking with Duke again, okay? When Kennedy Everson came into the game and had to stop against Charlotte North on the 8-meter, and the bench went absolutely insane. The save was amazing, but the moment for me is the reaction of the bench. They went absolutely insane. They were so happy for her, for the moment, and they went on to win that game. And then we had Coach Kimmel on, and she was talking about how when she watches that video and she sees the reaction of the teammates, it's a lot of people that are in Kennedy Everson's class. So that just kind of brings the moment together even more, in my opinion. And so that moment when they're just absolutely going crazy, jumping up and down, that was just crazy. So that makes me smile just thinking about it. Okay, that moment was amazing. I wish we had more of those moments. And that was just absolutely amazing. So that the save was amazing, but the reaction from her teammates, her friends, her sisters, her Duke family members was amazing. Okay, absolutely love that.
Yeah, I agree. I was watching that game too, and I was like, it's one of the moments that she'll remember for the rest of her life, and then she's gonna get to watch. I'm sure she didn't even notice people cheering for her at that point. Like, I'm sure she was so like, oh my God, that just happened. Oh my God, that just happened. But she'll have that feeling for the rest of her life, and she will get to watch. She'll see that film of everyone cheering for her, and that's why it's cool for her to have that moment.
And my second, almost my moment of the year, from the same game actually, when Sophia LaRose had the save on her knees off Charlotte North. That was crazy. Yeah. That was Sophia LaRose at her finest right there. Okay, and we heard that she's healthy going into 2023, so that's going to be amazing. She's going to be one of the best goalies in the country, one of the best goalies to watch. Okay, final topic as we look back on 2022. What is something that you would like to see changed going into 2023?
Okay, so I don't know. I had a hard time with this one because I wasn't sure. But I've also decided that I think I boil it down to the fact that I want more credit given between the 30s and to the people that are giving the assists and creating space for the goal scorers. Because I think that over the years, they've done a really good job of transitioning to also giving the goalies love. Like, there's been a goalie just won the Tort in 2019. Like, I feel like that's done a good job on that end. And like the huge cause turnover plays, like those get love, and the huge crazy goal scores, those get love. But I think that there's a lot that goes on in lacrosse that's like between the huge cause turnovers and the goal, there's a million people touching the ball and doing something in between it. And I think that it's hard because they're not going to be super flashy and they're not going to be things that people like talk about. But I do think the more that it's discussed, like, wow, watch how she pulls her defender away so she can make that pass, or like, watch how she's creating space for this girl to drive. Like, I just think that as that's talked about more like that education we provided to people who might not understand it, and that could create more viewers for the sport, have more understanding for the sport, and also just like even better players, because as that's talked about, and the young girls are watching Charlotte North rip 8 meters, so they're ripping 8 meters. Like, that's how that works. And I think that the more it's discussed about the tic-tacky stuff of women's lacrosse, the more younger people pick that up. And if you're picking up how to have ball movement at the age of 10, like, you're just going to be so much better when you're in college. So I think that kind of talking about all of that movement going along with it, so I don't have grand ideas for how to make that happen. So that's why I was hesitant to say it. But I do think that just that education of what's going on between the 30s from the huge crossover play to the goal would help grow women's lacrosse a lot. So I think that's what I settled on.
Interesting. Okay. I do agree with that. Kind of along the same, or through the same lens, I would like to see defensive players get more credit.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not as flashy either. So I feel like if it's not a check, people might just scroll through it,
Right.
But yeah, I think that's a good point. I think just going off what you said, the lacrosse is the fastest game on 2 feet. So a lot happens in the break, on the run, in a split second. So I think that's an interesting answer. I think that's a good answer. Was not expecting that. So thank you for that answer, Karson.
Of course.
I have 2 answers for you. One, the flopping we saw this year drove me absolutely insane. Okay, I don't know where it came from, but the last thing we need is for lacrosse to turn into soccer with a bunch of big crybabies flopping around. Their butts graze and they fall down. Oh my goodness! Look, I cannot stand flopping. Okay, I cannot stand it. I hope that gets addressed this year. I hope coaches say, you're not going to play for me if you're going to be flopping around like a little girl. Okay, we're not doing that out here. This is lacrosse. This is a woman's sport, not a girl's sport. Okay, I'm just saying the flopping is ridiculous, or was ridiculous last year. Got to go. GTG, got to go. Okay, and then second thing. Actually, before I go into my second thing, what are your thoughts on the flopping? Because you were actually on the field the past few years, especially last year when I feel like there was an increase in the flopping. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, one, have you watched any of the World Cup? This
gosh,
because that's just straight up. I will admit that we stepped on with metal spikes, but sometimes it's a little out of hand. Anyway, I feel like I can't say much because I was always the person that got tapped in the goggles and grabbed her head like that.
Oh my Karson, what is wrong with you?
I was a professional at getting myself 8 meters, so I'm not sure that I can speak much to it because I was probably part of the problem. But I think where it really got bad last year was in open field. There were a ton of yellow cards given out because somebody was like shoved in open field and they bent themselves in half, or like, because that was a focus last year, was to give cards to people who are just jacking people up on like transition. So as that learned, people started hitting you. And when you got hit, like the falling and that, I think, so that's the part that I didn't do. So that's the part that I can say got really bad last year. I think the stuff in the 8 meter is fine. No, I'm kidding. But I agree that it is definitely getting more dramatic, and as it gets more dramatic, it will get worse, and we should nip it in the butt as it.
And it's also, it's weird because you have Athletes Unlimited, which is very physical, and they don't have a whole lot of calls at all. And you have NCAA lacrosse, which last year had a lot of calls. And I get it. There will always be calls that some people think is a foul, some people don't. Some people think it's a card, some people don't. It's hard to be a referee in any sport, and it's never going to be perfect in anyone's eyes because we all have different viewpoints, different perspectives. But the flopping, just like I said, the grazing of the butts, and you flail your arms and they call a foul. I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, it's just I seriously think if the flopping continues, someone's going to hurt themselves while flopping. Okay, because I mean, some of the flops you see, it takes a lot of flexibility. What if the muscles don't want to be flexible in that one moment? Well, something bad's going to happen.
Okay? Something. Yeah.
There goes the hammy. Okay. Anyways, so I would love to see the flopping get addressed. Because women's lacrosse is a women's sport. Okay, women are strong. They're fierce. They can do all this stuff. They don't need to be flopping like men's soccer players, okay? Don't even get me started on those big wussies.
Yeah, no, I agree. I also think that if you're trying to prepare people to go to the pro league, like I always said that if I ended up in that pro league by the grace of God, I would have been horrible because I like so much of my game relied on the fact that it wasn't a super physical thing. Like I used that to my advantage because I've never been a very physical player. And I just feel like by calling everything at the NCAA level, you're not preparing the very best players to then go play in a pro league where you can rip shots from the 12 meter and shove people over whenever you want. Like I just think that the pro league and the NCAA need to find a way to mix better than they are right now.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it kind of goes forward in 2023. And I think one last thing on that, I want to see more consistency with games and how they are reffed. If it's Boston College versus Maryland, that should be reffed the exact same way as if it's American versus Delaware. Just because the teams are different, the players are different, and one team might be better, one team might have a superstar. They should all be reffed the same way, in my opinion. And I think there was a lot of inconsistency last year. I think I've been very honest about my opinion on this. I think the officiating in women's lacrosse is just awful. Just awful. I think we need a lot more refs. We need a lot more people that know what they're doing. We need a lot more consistency. I'm not trying to hate on the refs because, like I said, it's a tough job, but it's got to get better. Okay, it's got to get, as the sport grows, it's got to get better. It just has to. Okay, I'm gonna stop being negative on the refs. Okay, my second thing I would like to see changed is this: the Coach of the Year award should not automatically be given to the coach who wins the national championship. Sometimes that will be the case where the national championship head coach is the coach of the year. But just because they win the national championship does not mean they are the coach of the year. For example, Jenny Levy, one of the best coaches in the country. I don't think she should have been coach of the year last year. Her team had the most talent in the country. They were the favorites going into the season. Okay. They won. That doesn't make her the coach of the year. Okay. Yes, you have to be a great coach to make the talent work and to, make the decisions, like you said, pulling out Taylor Moreno in the Final Four game against Northwestern. But that doesn't make you the coach of the year. There are other coaches out there who have battled through adversity, who have to deal with injuries, who do more with less, okay, who come out of nowhere. And I think the perfect example I have is 2 years ago when Acacia Walker-Weinstein won the coach of the year when Boston College won the national championship. In my opinion, the undoubted coach of the year that year was Gary Gait for what he did at Syracuse with all the injuries they had. No one thought they were going to the national championship. They lose Emily Harris-Chuck, who is going to be a Tewaaraton finalist. Okay, that's the end of the season. Nope, here comes Emma Ward. Oh, no, here comes Emma Tyrrell. I mean, so much went on in that season for Syracuse. So many injuries. And you're telling me that he did more with less, had to overcome way more adversity, and he wasn't the coach of the year just because he didn't win the national championship? I mean, come on. That's ridiculous. And so just because you win the national championship does not mean you are the coach of the year. And I'm not hating on any coaches. I'm just saying this is for all coaches. You shouldn't have to win a national championship to be recognized as the coach of the year.
Yeah.
Coaching, it's so much more than obviously what we see as wins and losses, but you have to make sure your kids are passing their classes. They're doing what they're supposed to do on and off the field. You have the community service aspect. Are you getting your team involved in the community? And as far as coaching, what are you doing on the field? What are you doing in between the lines? So there are so many different factors, and it shouldn't just come down to, oh, you won the national championship, here you go. I just don't think that's right.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that it would be really cool to see about where teams are, like what you said, like what kind of adversity they've battled through and what they've had to overcome. And then also like where did they start at the beginning of the season? Like you said, Boston College was supposed to win, or North Carolina was supposed to win, they won. Like what's the team that was not even supposed to be in the top 45 and ended up in the top 20? Like that was coaching. That's like somebody who's like took the players that they had and figured it out. So I agree with you. I think there's a lot more that goes into it than just, oh, you won a national championship, you must be a great coach. Undoubtedly, but it doesn't mean that they're the best coach in the NCAA.
For sure. And it's a yearly award. It's not a referendum on their whole career. It's a yearly award, okay?
Yeah.
And I mean, you won a national championship. That's great. That's great. I think maybe with some of these awards, there needs to be a little more thought that goes into who gets them.
I agree.
I think that's the
I'm
best way to say it.
Sorry, I just dropped something in the shower. So loud. Yeah, no,
I hear it, so. Awesome. So that is our recap on 2022. Any final thoughts on the year? This is our final podcast episode of 2022.
Woo. No, I am excited to see things shake up next year. I feel like there is a shift. I feel like there'll be some sort of shifting next year with Boston College losing Charlotte North and North Carolina losing who they lost. I feel like this year was kind of predictable. I feel like this year, this NCAA championship, it was going to take something weird happening for those two to not end up in the national championship. So I'm excited for this coming year because I don't think it's going to be like that.
It should be. I cannot wait until January. Okay, it's going to be amazing. I cannot wait to talk Lacrosse Cup January and share our predictions and all of that good stuff. Okay, so 2022 is coming to a close. And let's just say we saw some changes in women's lacrosse. Charlotte North is gone from Boston College. Jamie Ortega is gone from North Carolina. But all that means is, like you said, next year is going to be fun. We don't know what's going to happen. Why Duke's going to win the whole thing. But we'll get to that later on. It's going to be fun. I cannot wait to see what happens. And women's lacrosse, it's been growing each year. 2022 was another great year for the growth of the sport. Exciting games, exciting players, great coaches. Everything was on display, everything. And so 2023 will hopefully build on that. A little more parity in the sport, which I think we saw an improvement of this year. And I think it's going to be amazing. I think we will have some new faces in the Final Four, but we will save that for January. Awesome. So that is a wrap on the player and the journalist for 2022.
Woo!